3 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, I'll kick things off very briefly. We had to have this conversation a year ago as we tried to anticipate the impacts of COVID on the River Festival, and I have to commend Brad and his staff. While it feels like the River Festival's a long ways off, and there's plenty of reason for optimism about COVID and possibly seeing a recovery or progress, they have been very diligently and objectively planning, and they'll get into the details of it, but you don't just pull this off overnight. This is a long-term project that takes a lot of advanced planning, and so Brad's brought this conversation to us today to talk about the 2021 River Festival.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. For those that are on the phone line, this is Brad Anderson. I'm Director of Salina Arts and Humanities. And I also have on the call today a number of our staff. So when we get into question and answer times, if something is beyond my direct knowledge or you ask for more specific information, I hope to have the staff members necessary here to be able to respond to that. Lauren, you can go to the first slide if you want to.
Before we go any further, I just want to check to make sure I see that Commissioner Ryan is here, and I just wanted to make sure that he was able to connect and he can hear us and be heard.
I can hear you. If you can hear me.
I can, thank you.
Brad, I'm going to share the screen now. Will you do me a favor? If you have a particular staff member that needs to be brought into the conversation, if you can just indicate that to me just so I can unmute them, I would appreciate that.
Very good. Thank you.
Go into slideshow mode.
Yeah. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Our pretty one of the big crowd is there. I'm here today to provide an update regarding the department's plans to reschedule the 2021 Smoky Hill River Festival from June 10th through the 13th to Labor Day weekend, September 2nd through the 5th for this year only. The decision to make the move was done with a combination of public health, economic impact, as well as our ability to fulfill the purpose and mission of the event in mind. The presentation today will take about 20 minutes or so. If my timing is right, I'll have plenty of time for you all to ask questions and to get some additional details towards the end. So with that, I'll go ahead and go on. Next slide, please. The Salina Arts and Humanities staff, with input from stakeholders, public health officials, and peers in the field, spent 8 weeks in the late fall and early winter trying to imagine and program for a June event with the current social distancing guidelines in place. That's really all that we had to work with at this time, and many of the indicators locally are that until the vaccine has been fully implemented across the community with some additional time for both shots and the few-week delay after the second shot, for some, that was really the only realistic guideline we could follow. At the conclusion of this review, the details of which will come shortly, we determined it would not be appropriate to hold the event in June. So I'm showing our hand. I'm giving you the punchline to the end of the joke or the whodunit at the end of the novel, but that's really where we're headed. And so the time I'll spend now, go ahead and go to the next slide, Lauren, is to take a look at what we looked at. This is not the entirety of what we looked at, but the next 7 slides or so are going to show a comparison of a few of the areas that impacted the decision to move the festival to the September date. In June, we would, and I'm not going to read slides to you, just to give you a heads up. I think this has been out since Thursday, so I trust that you would have or will have a chance to review some additional details that are provided in the slides. In June, we would likely have to cancel the use of shuttles and the big band dance. The Artiopolis crafts area for kids would need to be a carry-out only just due to the close nature of hands-on activities of kids and volunteers working together, many of which the volunteer and some of the parents are at a vulnerable age. We just didn't feel like in a June event that was likely to be able to happen. By September, we believe it's much more likely that all of these can occur as normally as planned. Some possible public health adjustments would need to be made. We might have to continue to look at some sanitizing of certain areas of the children's area, but a much greater likelihood of being able to have an adequate number of volunteers and to be able to have a larger number of people working in proximity, even for short amounts of time for some of those crafts. Next slide. In June, there would need to be significant, hang on a second, I want to, let's see.
Hold on. Sorry.
Yep.
There you go. Sorry, Brad.
That's okay. I forget to look up at the two screens here and make sure that we're on the same page. In June, there would need to be significant alterations to the backstage areas. We'd have to limit access to patrons in the art exhibitors as they move through the show. We explored ideas, for instance, of putting a line down the middle of the art shows and having people only go one way through the show and maintain 6-foot distancing between them, and only one family unit per booth at a time, and so on. As you might imagine, that didn't really lend itself well to what could create both positive and profitable experiences for the artists. Additionally, some artists and performers indicated they would not participate if they hadn't been vaccinated. A number of them fall into the phase 5 group, and out of respect to their needs and health considerations, we thought that was an important factor that we should have considered as well. The staff anticipates that by a September date, a large number of vaccines would be distributed. All those intending on having one should be able to, or are much more likely to have been able to have access to a vaccine, have its full impact, and still be under the protective time that has currently been estimated for them to work. This would help mitigate risk and some of the excessive precautions that we'd have to take if we did hold the event in June. Next slide, Lauren. The disinfection of public facilities such as tables, extra hand washing stations, and restrooms would require significantly higher involvement by staff and volunteers, also increasing our costs. We didn't go to the trouble of trying to quantify exactly how many more restrooms per capita we might need, or what kind of specific volunteers that we'd need to spray a restroom, or how often we'd have to wipe a service or a table, or whether those facilities would be provided for people to police their own tables either before sitting or after they were done. But as you can imagine, that just that action in itself, with I think about 60 or 70 porta potties and I believe 15 to 20 hand washing stations throughout the park, may not be adequate for the numbers that we would normally expect. The food vendor areas and other spaces in the park would be a little bit more difficult to manage as well. You'll see in a little bit here in terms of our anticipated attendance numbers. We tried to imagine the 36 food vendors with 6-foot spaces between each family unit or group, not between individuals, but as 1 to 4 people go to a booth to order, or how many people we might be able to accommodate in that space, and is it even possible? For those of you who've gone to a festival during those peak times of people wanting to eat and get drinks, that main food row can be almost shoulder to shoulder, very difficult to pass with a stroller or wagon, let alone if we had to increase those distances that significantly. There were some things that I think may come up here in just a minute too, but that we that we looked at, like for instance, whether it's in June or September, it's highly likely we'd be eliminating the food tent that's over by the fine arts area and behind Food Row and near the tennis courts, because of the unmasked, harder to control spaces. It's not worth the $1,000 we pay for that tent for that week, for the few people who would be able to be served. So our alternative, and we discussed this with park staff as well, but is to spread picnic tables throughout the park in shady spots and allow people to gather more safely separated for eating and drinking that they're not doing at their chairs and blankets. The next slide. In the kids area, face painting and Lego Lane are two popular areas that the kids populate, but due to sanitation and exposure risk, if we held this in June, we would just eliminate those, again, further reducing the kind of experience that kids and families have come to expect. There are some alternatives for face painting a little bit later in the year, including some spray-on temporary tattoos or some airbrushed tattoos and some things that don't require as long or as close of work for a prolonged period. So we feel like by that later time, and especially at an outdoor event after, hopefully the virus is minimized, that we'd have a chance to keep those in place. You're okay, Lauren, with you can go to the next one. This one is a little bit more layered. With assistance from the city's engineering department, the staff did their best to establish park capacity. How many people can we safely get within the park with social distancing in mind? Again, this was assuming we were going to try to do this for June. We used a variety of grids superimposed over the park grounds. One was a 6-foot grid and just said, how many 6-foot spaces are there in the primary area of the festival? And then we did another one with a 16-foot grid and particularly looked at that in front of the Stein stage so that we got an idea of what a normal Friday or Saturday night or Thursday at Festival Jam, how many people did we have in that particular area? And what if we put people in groups and then had them with 6-foot distances between each group? How many people could we get? And it was amazingly low with those kinds of spacings. We did not attempt to put individuals at 6-foot distances throughout the Stein stage because that isn't how people gather or the kind of experience that they'd want. So I think we averaged somewhere around 6 or 7 people, I think, per 10-foot square with a 6-foot space around them. The engineering department's mapping was really, really helpful because they did that over using their satellite imagery and then we eliminated some of the areas that aren't used, like the formal garden and where the hard facilities are. We even in this preliminary plan for a June event, we eliminated the Bravo stage in the north part of the park and then imagined moving a portion of the craft artists over to the Bravo area. And in doing so, that created a little bit more room for shopping and some social distancing between the artists. That Four Rivers or that West Side Arts area is pretty tightly packed and a little more congested at the loops. And so this was a way to work around that potential conflict. So with all that being said, the results indicated that we could safely distance and manage approximately 10,000 people in the park, 10 to 11,000 people at the very most. We get 11,000 in a concentrated area on Thursday night. And And on a busy Friday or Saturday, late afternoon and evening, and in some cases in the early mornings when the children's area is packed, our previous numbers have indicated we'll have between 12 and 15,000 people in the park for extended durations at a time. So again, kind of using June as the benchmark, this would potentially result in patrons being denied entrance to the park until a sufficient number of guests left. Our staff explored daily passes for sale at the gates, single day advance sales with limited numbers. We looked at some other creative options for how we might do attendance, including a portion of a day, attendance, and have a morning ticket and an afternoon ticket and so on. No matter what we came up with, the administration, management, and structure of that is would be really prohibitive to go forward. So the staff ultimately we didn't come up with a satisfactory result for being able to have the largest number of people in the park possible, and delaying it for a later time when social distancing may not be as prevalent seemed to make sense. Go ahead and go to the next slide. A review of local, state, and national forecasts of vaccine distribution indicate that some phase 5 recipients may not have received their full vaccine by early June, making a significant relaxing of distancing guidelines unlikely by this time. I do want to be clear. I didn't ask Hannah at emergency management or Michelle, I'm sorry, or our Jason, the health officer. I didn't ask them to go on record specifically. I just told them where we were headed and what we were looking at, and asked if there was a higher likelihood of having something that appeared more normal by a late summer date. And their early indications, again, this is in early to mid-January that we had this conversation, was that they were much more comfortable at an outdoor event happening 90 days after vaccine distribution through phase 5 would be completed than they would be as early as June. They did indicate that masks are highly likely well into the fall and possibly through much of 2021. So while social distancing, especially at outdoor events, may not be as great of a concern for something like River Festival, the mask wearing could still be prevalent and something that we'd have to take into account and enforce. But we'd be able to do so with a little easier passing on the sidewalks and moving in and out of facilities and standing in line and so on, depending on what the health guidelines are for that time. So Lauren, next slide. As reported earlier, and this is the financial impact, lower attendance at the park means lower revenue. The festival is made possible each year by private and public funding. 2/3 of the revenue that is earned for the festival, or 2/3 of the revenue for the festival is earned. That's ticket sales, booth fees, food sale commissions, t-shirt sales, other things along those lines. But our primary one is attendance, and about 42, we say between 40 and 43% on a given year of our revenue is based on attendance. So if we reduced our daily attendance down by what could be 1/3, that could create some potential problems for us in terms of the trying to balance our budget by the end of the year. The other 1/3 of the revenue comes from private contributions. The Salina Arts and Humanities Foundation Board has been supportive of this recommendation to delay the event, and the My primary job, besides working with this well-qualified staff, is to try to anticipate the earned revenue, but also try to mitigate losses as much as we can. And I'd like for the city to be able to fare as well as possible. And final conclusions, next slide, Lauren. As you are all well aware, the Smoky Hill River Festival is a beloved and cherished event in Salina. It's not only a festival of the arts, but it's a celebration of the spirit of this community. The final decision by staff and management to move the date was done with this in mind. It's a tremendous amount of work, but the staff agrees that the extra time, energy, and sacrifice is worth the effort to make the festival the very best it can be with the challenges and circumstances that we've been doing. Next slide. And the last two here, just so you can kind of see where we are in our schedule. What's next? I'm not going to read this detailed list, but I kind of highlighted some things that we're going to be doing February through May. Some of those have already commenced. And then the other more technical details in terms of our press briefing and when wristbands go on sale and so on in the June through August time. The staff has spent the last few weeks updating calendars, contacting contract service providers, having preliminary conversations with advisory bodies, the Salina Arts and Humanities Foundation Board, key volunteer leaders in an effort to identify as many obstacles as possible. Contract language for our artist agreements and performer agreements is being updated with Greg Bankston's help and Anna Pauscher-Morowitz from our staff. And she's been having great success in renegotiating contracts with artists who we had booked for last fall or for last spring in June to this new date. We are looking at other technical details and having some extensive staff meetings once a week to go over some of these technical details and moving parts, because as you may or may not imagine, we normally, in a normal year, we would begin planning the 2022 festival this April. So we're 14 months in planning for each festival. In this case, we're going to be planning the 2022 festival at the same time that we're trying to detail and execute the 2021 at a later date. And we're still trying to figure out how to navigate some of those minefields, but believe that with some careful planning and following the calendars that we've set for the last 45 years, that we can do that. A press release is going to be distributed following this meeting with you all today. Social media and website updates will also be posted shortly after 4 p.m. In order to keep the public informed at about the same time that you all are being informed, so that rumor mills and misinformation doesn't have a chance to get out. We want to be on the front end of this and speak from both the confidence and assuredness that we're going to go forward to the best of our ability. We recognize that things are very fluid right now, so we're doing our best to stay flexible as planning and execution goes forward. With that being said, and on to the last slide, the Salina Arts and Humanities staff is going to be focused on these 4 key elements that are before you as we continue our work. We're going to maintain the positive spirit and celebratory mission of the festival. We're going to continue to be respectful of and promote public health and safety using available science and professional resources. We want to be a responsible partner to artists, performers, volunteers, city departments, and festival stakeholders. And finally, we'd like for the event to be as smooth as ever with its vendors, service providers, and citizens as we produce this 45th anniversary event. One of the best compliments that our staff receives every year are the people who show up at the park and or contact us in March or April and say, hey, if there's still time, I've got a great idea for your festival, like we just started it. And we have to say, well, gosh, we had the press conference a week ago, and it's ready to go. And so we like it that people can come in and the rest of the worries of the world disappear. And we hope that this year, by delaying until September, we have the opportunity for it to be as comfortable and as smooth as possible. So with that, Lauren, I think we can pull it off the screen share, and I am available for questions.
First, I'd just like to thank you and your staff for the effort that you put in going through all the details and all the different ways that the festival would be impacted, knowing what we know now, and establishing occupancy for the park and what that looks like. And I know that a lot of work went into reaching this decision, and I would just like to thank you for sharing that with us and for putting all that time and analysis into it. And that's all I have. If anyone else has a question or a comment.
Commissioner Davis, just one question. I agree. It's you've done your homework. It looks great. Plus, if it's Labor Day weekend, everybody has Monday to rest up before they go back to work Tuesday. What would be different is that school would be in session on that Friday. Two-part question. Does that affect the programming that you would offer that would, on Friday in particular, would be geared towards the younger folks? Or have you talked with USD 305 to see if they can creatively structure a fun day at the festival and still get credit for having kids in school?
Well, the short answer is you're the first for us to be out publicly and openly to share our intent. USD 305 is going to have to be one of our earliest and next conversations, in part because some of our key committee leaders and our technical support staff are employees of 305. We believe that there are some ways we can work around that in the event that they don't have the available staff or time to be able to do a release. In terms of the scheduling and programming, a large number of our Friday regular attendees, especially in the children's area, are the numerous daycare centers that are throughout the community. They come in their cute little matching shirts and all holding hands or tied at the waist or whatever they do to try to keep loss from being too severe. And they work their way through the various pieces and programs. And so we know that Friday morning would probably be a little quieter because like the daycare program at the Y or the young kids program at the Y would not be in session on that day. And so they do sometimes bring over a decent number of kids. But in terms of the programming schedule, we're just at the early phases of saying, would it make sense to open a little later in the children's area on Friday and stay open a little later into the afternoon? Would it be worth a conversation with the superintendent to see if they have some flexibility in their schedule and whether it's a teacher in-service day or something else that might be able to be scheduled at that time instead of 2 weeks later? So those are on our list with 305. And I believe that you also mentioned the Labor Day holiday, and I do want to say we did look ahead at, because of that holiday, typically 2 of our city departments, Parks and Public Works, are en masse in the park, restoring it and getting tables and chairs put away and tearing out signs and snow fencing and other things. Our intent is to keep some security in the park to protect some of the assets that we have. It may be open on Labor Day for the public to be able to enjoy, although there will still be some festival remnants there. But our intent is to not incur overtime or disrupt at least that 1 day off or the 3-day weekend for our public works employees that had counted on that holiday. So we would jump back into the park on Tuesday after the event rather than Monday to finish putting away our toys.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
yep. And I think Commissioner Ryan had a.
Well, I think you sort of touched on my question area. I was going to ask you to comment on the large volunteer contribution that happens with the festival and how you see that shifting from the spring to holiday weekend.
We still aren't sure. I have one of our staff members that we're kind of designating with a new charge or challenge this spring for the next year. Well, it's actually longer than that, but to help initiate a more formal recruitment, retention, and recognition program for volunteers, both for our department, our division, and the museum. Susan Everwine and Rosa De La Cruz will be working on our volunteer efforts and kind of streamlining some of that along with input from our staff. To go back to that, part of, as an example, and I'm not going to throw one of our local businesses or corporations under the bus, but if we tried to hold the event in June, there's one organization in particular that collectively represents almost 200 volunteers in the course of the weekend for all of the events. And they indicated it would be very difficult to participate at that early of a date due to the health and safety of their employees and the vulnerabilities of those they serve. And so that would be a significant loss for us in terms of trying to replace that many in one organization. So we're hoping with a little bit extra time and some additional time to recruit and for our volunteers to be vaccinated, that we'll be in a much better place to retain many who've donated time for years.
Are we ahead of the curve as far as putting ourselves back on track with our festival? And what are all the other people doing that have events both in that slot that we're planning to move to and that are generally earlier in the year and probably also thinking about moving to later?
Well, I'm going to try
able
not
to be gauged at all.
Yeah, well, I'm going to try not to brag too much, but I think that, and probably the person who's had the most direct experience with this on our staff is Anna Pauscher. Anna, as I mentioned, has been talking to our some of our entertainers, our headliners, and others. And Anna, do you want to share for a minute about some of the conversations that you've had?
Sure. I'll second, I see us as ahead of the curve as far as what I'm hearing from other events and organizations that normally schedule in that late spring, early summer timeframe that the festival normally occurs. I do know too, a lot of our performers go to, there's a little bit of a circuit or similar events that they always go to. And I'm hearing some of those events haven't officially rescheduled, but they were waiting on us just a little bit to understand what our move was going to be so that they wouldn't hit the same time frame as us. So I think we'll be hearing a lot more as we move on. Labor Day weekend, I think, is going to be a popular weekend, but I think we'll be one of the first to announce.
Also, in terms of the schedule, this puts us, we tried not to conflict with local offerings or direct competition with other statewide events. At the current time, the state fair would open the Friday after our festival. And the Saturday before, we did look at, just for a little while, but we did imagine something off the Labor Day weekend, and we looked at the last weekend of August. But on that Saturday night, the Stiefel Theater has what I believe to be a near, if it's not already sold out, crowd of Martina McBride. And in order to be kind of a good steward of the revitalized downtown, of a new hotel that hasn't been able to benefit from a festival yet, and our other local providers that it might make more sense to do it at a time that we're not competing with another large musical draw from, and that's one of the first concerts of that scale that has been rescheduled. So we're snug right in between those. So.
Mike's Craig here. I did have some people ask about whether it would conflict with the Tri-Rivers Fair, and the 2021 dates are August 4th through the 8th. So there's not a conflict there.
Yeah. We, it's not all rosy. I mean, I will say from an operational standpoint, one of the bigger, I'd say it's a challenge, but something that we felt capable of dealing with. We currently are, we'll have a new visual arts coordinator, the person who manages the art shows and the art installations, joining us in March. Susan Eberwein on our staff has been helping kind of maintain that position and work administratively along with the other support staff. But Susan is the program assistant to that position, and she got a survey out to the accepted artists for 2021 that we had carried over from 2020. And of those responses, about 2/3, 60-some%, I think, had indicated they were willing to change dates to that Labor Day weekend without a conflict or a problem. And some were appreciative of us being that far ahead of the curve, as Anna said, and giving them fair notice and just doing our best to hold the event. That means that we've got approximately 1/3 of the show that still needs to be filled, and not wanting to go back to zero and start the jury process all over at considerable disruption of time, staffing, and money. We feel it will be better with our long history of working with artists from all over the country to curate those positions in. So the 30 or so, maybe up to 40 positions that we have, we'll be able to kind of hand select those in their respective media and fill in the vacancies as they're finally determined. Some of those folks who expressed hesitancy to participate may change their mind if their shows either get delayed or canceled, or they decide we're a better gig for the weekend. So we have a strong reputation for treating artists well, for servicing them well when they're here with refreshments and knowledgeable and polite patrons. So we feel like it'll be something we can get through.
Anyone else? Questions or comments? Oh.
Well, Mayor, if I can ask a favor from the commissioners, much like our arts commissioners and others who have their kind of a pulse on the community from respective areas, as indicated, we're planning every day and we're adjusting. We will be emphasizing both the fun and the spirit of the festival, but at the same time, knowing that it's only once every 100 years, apparently, that we have a global pandemic, and we're doing that with that in mind. We don't know what the next 90 days is going to hold, or the next 120 days, but we are going to use fiscal discipline wherever we can to minimize our risk and exposure until we are much more confident about the rollout of the vaccine and the percent of the population that chooses to take that, and whether or not there's variations of the virus that haven't been anticipated, and so we're going to constantly be watching that. One of our next steps is to invite the public health officials and emergency management to an upcoming staff meeting to go through sharing with them what we've started on so far and to let them poke some holes in it and see. We welcome you or other citizens that you're in contact with to do the same for us. If you have questions, concerns, or ideas, we are easy to reach and willing to listen and want to be here to serve.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anything from anyone else, any members of the public that would like to speak to this, that have questions? If you could virtually raise your hand. I don't think that I see any members of the public beyond the Salina Journal reporter, Mr. Rankin, but if there is, please raise your virtual hand or turn on your camera and wave your physical hand, and we'll open it up. I'm not seeing anyone. So,
Mayor Hodges,
yes.
if I might, and I wasn't going to say very much, but it occurs to me that Mr. Anderson might like some confidence as to the consensus of the commission, and I think we're doing a responsible thing. I know that holding it in June is probably not a wise thing to do at all. And I think trying to do it at the end of the summer gives it some time, gives the vaccine some time to do its work, and maybe get the case count a little bit more under control than it has been. Mr. Anderson, don't take this as my permission to spend money hand over fist, but I would not be that distressed to even, if we hadn't to lose a little money this year as opposed to making a little, it was normally the case. I wouldn't be terribly distressed by that if we can have the event. I think we need to be responsible, but I also understand that these are unique circumstances, and the likelihood of coming out as far ahead as we normally have, not that it's a large piece, but we've normally covered expenses, is fairly unlikely. So it may be that we have to accept a little bit of a loss this time around just to have the community event, and it does mean a lot to a lot of people.
I'd second that emotion.
I agree. I think you definitely have a consensus among the commission that it's the responsible thing to do. You've done a lot of analysis, and hopefully when we can get together and celebrate at the River Festival, we can do that with the fewest restrictions possible and really be able to enjoy all that it has to offer and enjoy a return to relative normalcy. So.
Yeah, we're hoping that that's the number one question that we've been getting throughout the community is, are you going to have a festival? What are what's the likelihood? You've got to have, and so I am anticipating that the public is going to be enthusiastic about an opportunity to celebrate the sun rising in a new environment, and that we'll have the ability, Commissioner Franz on the fiscal side, knowing that we may have a slightly lower attendance just because of some people's anxiety and so on. We already have built in a slight cushion with the wristband increase in price that you all approved 2 years ago. And that we haven't been able to have an event yet at those new prices. And so even if our attendance was down slightly, I think we've got a little bit of a cushion, because rest assured we didn't spend everything, our budget to spend everything that we were raising our prices by. We were hoping for that cushion. So we'll continue to watch that going forward. So.
And if we're still wearing masks, you'll have the most fashionable mask with the festival logo. Just smear it all over it.
Replace the face painting booth with a mask decorating booth.
There you go.
I think our museum director has a Mona Lisa smile mask that just trips me up every time I see her. So I think there are, well, maybe hope there aren't a lot of Picasso masks and Van Gogh. Those might be a little disturbing, but well, I might, and I know we're almost out of time, but since I do have staff here, if any of the staff feel like there's something that I missed that would be important, if you'll hold your hand up, I think Lauren would be able to see you. So.
One second, Anna.
Thank you. Brad alluded to this earlier, but I thought I'd mention, as far as our entertainment goes, it's been really encouraging that nearly all of them that we hired for 2020 that were not able to make it are moving with us from June 2021 to September 2021. And so it's encouraging to see that they're excited to get out there and perform again when it's safe, and we're hoping that our event is one of the early ones.
All right.
Okay.
Does that about wrap things up? If so,
that's good for us.
okay, awesome. Well, thank you very much, Brad, and thanks to your staff for wearing all the different hats and juggling all the different schedules. And hopefully we'll all be able to celebrate on Labor Day. Mr. Scragg, do you have anything further to add?
No, not really. I mentioned it before, but the decision we had to make in 2020 came early. That was a really hard decision, and I have a lot of respect for Brad and his staff for working that one through, let alone what we're having to adapt to this year. So I'm as optimistic as anyone we might be able to get this behind us and have a celebratory event in September.
I like the sound of that. Well, thank you all. I guess we'll reconvene here at 4 o'clock. Thank you. 4 o'clock. I'll call the Salina City Commission meeting for Monday, January 8th, 2021 to order, and begin by confirming that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided by staff.
Yes.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll go with a roll call, please.
Mayor Hodges,
Here.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Krantz,
Here.
Commissioner Hoppeck,
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Thank you. Will you all please join me in observing a moment of silence? Thank you. We don't have any awards and proclamations today, but I will turn to City Manager Mike Scragg for the update on COVID as we know it in our city this week.
Sure, Mike Scragg here, and I would remind you that these numbers are based on Fridays. It's a little easier for us to gather that data and compile it with data coming out on Monday. So currently there are 197 new cases reported in the past week. The prior week there were 196 new cases reported, so one more than the previous week. There are currently 1,569 active cases, which is a decrease of 220 from the prior week. There are 4,051 total recoveries reported, which is 414 more than the prior week. There are currently 17 hospitalizations reported compared to 22 a week ago. And the death count as of last Friday was 95 compared to 92 the week before. So 3 additional deaths in that 1 week time period. I would also share with you that we have, I participate in an ongoing weekly meeting on Monday mornings with the Salina County Health Officer and representatives of the medical profession, emergency management, and some others. And so my takeaways from that conversation this week were that the mass gathering order that's currently in effect has an expiration date of February 21st. The health officer regularly seeks input not only in that meeting that I described, but in other standing meetings that he has with others throughout the week. They, and I say they, meaning the county health officer as well as the representatives of the medical community, are aware that Sedgwick County recently modified their mass gathering limits and increased the number to 100, I believe. It appears from their conversation that their recommended course of action at the moment is to not only continue to monitor our local numbers, but monitor what occurs in Sedgwick County to see if that change in their mass gathering has any effect, either positive or negative. The county health officer may be providing more details next week regarding any revisions that they might likely take effect the following week, which would be that February 21st date. And then additionally, with respect to vaccinations, the county has 800 additional vaccinations or vaccines for this week. If they complete those during the week, that would get them very close to their stated goal of 30% of our population at 65 years of age or older being vaccinated, which could then allow them to transition to other members or other demographics within that phase 2 high contact critical category. They're reviewing the information they've received. As of last week, they had 7,500 people registered on their registration portal, indicating, both their interest in being vaccinated as well as they're providing information about what might qualify them, which would take some review on the county's part. And then additional details about their next steps of the phase 2 vaccinations after meeting that 65 and older goal are likely to be provided as part of what they call their VaxFax communication that they send out on a regular basis. So I think the next one of those is scheduled to go out tomorrow. So kind of recapping that a little bit, I think they're going to monitor the mass gathering numbers and may have their thoughts collected and more information to provide next week. And they are optimistic about being able to approach their goal of 30% of the 65 and older population being vaccinated, which will allow them to transition to other members of the phase 2 demographic, and they may be providing additional details as early as tomorrow as part of their VaxFax communication that they put out.
Gotcha. But the folks that have registered, who have submitted their registration through the portal, have done what they need to do at this point in order to be notified when there is a vaccine dose available for them?
Yes, I think they've got all the information. They've done what they've been asked to do. There's varying statuses in terms of people that obviously are in phase 2, people that are obviously not part of phase 2 that have gone ahead and registered, people in the county and out of the county. So part of what they're having to do is sort through all that information they've received to move on to the next prioritization level.
Absolutely, because speaking as someone who's not eligible during phase 2, I went ahead and registered just so that I know that when it is my time in the queue, my registration would be there, to be pulled up. So
yeah.
I guess I would encourage people to go to that registration portal and get registered. So even if you're not eligible in phase 2, once you get to the phasing where you are eligible, they'll have that information.
Could you give the public, people come up to me and ask, where do I call or where do I go? And I told them the health department, but is there a specific address, web address, or how does a person register if they don't have internet access?
The VaxFax includes both of those. There is a link on the county's COVID page. I don't know it off the top of my head. And then I believe the senior center was providing assistance to those that didn't have the technology or maybe the wherewithal to do it online. And I think there is also a phone number. So the health department is kind of the point of contact for all of that. If time allows, I'll see if I can't find that information as the meeting goes on and announce that. Underscoring the encouragement to register with that portal, the health department has put out that same message, and that is the resource that they will turn to as they progress into scheduling and contacting vaccinations. So the registration portal is that centralized point to get yourself into consideration for vaccination.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our thoughts are definitely with the 3 Salinans that lost their lives due to COVID this week. So thank you for the update, Mr. Scragg. And I realize I've kind of probably gotten ahead of myself because we haven't had our review of how citizens can participate via the Zoom link. And so I will turn to Ms. Driscoll to give us an update or give us a refresher on that before we go to Citizens Forum.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let me just turn on the screen sharing. Okay, so if you plan to participate in the meeting today, there are a couple different ways you can do that, and I'm going to go through the various ways depending on what device you're using. So the first option is to use your PC, so your home-based computer, and when the mayor offers an opportunity for the public to comment, we will ask you to raise your hand. You can do that by clicking on the participation button at the bottom screen. That's that menu bar that has your other option choices when you're looking through. And if you're on a PC, you likely have logged in using the internet on zoom.com. You're also, when you look at the participant box, so if you hit that button on the menu you just saw, you'd see a list of everybody who's in the meeting. You can also click on the bottom and choose to raise your hand. There's like 3 small dots in a square, and that would also be a way to raise your hand. If you're on your iPad or your iPhone or many other mobile devices, it's going to look slightly different. The menu bar of options such as muting, stopping video, and again, that participant icon are in the upper right-hand corner. And so if you hit participant, you're going to see everybody who's in the meeting, and then you can click on your name and raise your hand from there. And that window of where your choices are, you've got chat, meeting settings, and there's that hand raising bit. Lastly, for those who have questions during the meeting, you can directly chat to me as the meeting moderator in case there's a technical difficulty or something that needs to be adjusted. And you can do that by clicking the chat button, similar location to where the hand raising is at. And lastly, if you're calling in on your phone, there's no slide for this, But if you called in on your phone, you've been let into the meeting, you can hit *9 to indicate that you need to raise your hand during those public comment periods, and I'll be able to see that. And what happens when you raise your hand is you're unclicked, and then the mayor recognizes you, and we just go through the list of comments or the list of hands throughout the meeting as the opportunities arise. With that, I think we are good. Madam Mayor, did I miss anything?
Well, Mike Sprague here. Got one thing to throw in. We do not have an executive session on our agenda today, but the Attorney General's office has previously advised we should provide an explanation of that process regardless. And so, as we've explained before, the Zoom technology allows the meeting host to set up essentially a side room for the participants in an executive session to go to that side room. All other participants, public, staff, and otherwise, don't have to do anything. They can stay on this Zoom call or on the original Zoom call. And then as the executive session adjourns and we return at the specified time, those that were in the executive session would rejoin that main Zoom call. So much like a physical executive session where the public would stay put and those participating in the executive session would leave, in a Zoom format, those and members of the public not participating in the exec session do nothing. They just stay on the call. The rest of the participants leave and then return to the call. And I do have that website address if you
Oh, great. Thank you very much. Yes, please.
It is vaccinatesalinecountyks.com. All one word, no spaces. Vaccinatesalinecountyks.com. As far as those, I was not able to quickly find a resource for those that don't have an internet connection or need assistance, but I know the Senior Center has previously provided that assistance, and I'm a little hesitant to say to call the health department knowing what their workload is like, but if all else fails, I think that would be the resource.
Thank you. vaccinatesalinecountyks.com. Great. Thank you very much.
And vaccinate has 2 C's in it.
Yes.
And Kansas is shortened, is abbreviated KS.
Correct.
vaccinatesalinecountyks.com. All right. Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to Citizens Forum. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to speak to the commission on an item that doesn't appear on today's agenda. And we would request that you keep your remarks or your questions to 5 minutes. And if there's any member of the public who would like to speak at this time, I'd ask you to raise your virtual hand. And if you have trouble locating where that is on the Zoom feature, then feel free to turn on your camera and raise your physical hand.
Madam Mayor, you have one hand raised.
All right.
Lene Meyer.
Oh, yeah. Ms. Myers?
Looks like she's still muted though.
Hold on, sorry. There.
Thank you. Ms. Meyer, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I was told that there was the site on Facebook, so I checked it out, that indicated there were a number of violations that were given out because various businesses, etc., were not wearing masks. And I just wanted to get some details about that and then find out if there is follow-up on those violations to see if those people are now in compliance of wearing masks like we're supposed to be, like the businesses and people are supposed to be. So that's my question.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Meyer. I will look at Mr. Scragg to see what additional information he can give.
Mike Scragg here. The police department is actively contacting businesses and individuals regarding the face mask ordinance. I know there have been some violations and a lot more warnings and contacts and violations. They also are mindful of follow-up to confirm compliance. I don't have numbers in front of me to cite for you, but that has been an active effort on the part of the police department for over a month now, I would estimate.
Do you have
I'm sorry,
is
go
there
ahead.
any, do you have any number you said you don't have any numbers at all in terms of how many violation or how many checks there have been given, how many people have been checked, and then how many violations? Did I understand that right? That you don't have that information?
Yeah, you mentioned a Facebook site, and we're not maintaining a Facebook site that reports that information. I do have some information that's a little outdated, if I can find it back here. Let's see here. By mid-January, we had made over 400 contacts, 4 citations issued, about 31 warnings issued, and the remainder were initial checks and contacts. So, as I said, that information is a little dated, but 400 business checks, 4 citations, 31 warnings.
That's good to hear, and I appreciate the effort that they're putting out, because it's the best thing to do. Unfortunately, we have to.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Meyer.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Madam Mayor, I have no more hands raised.
Thank you, Ms. Driscoll. With that, we don't have any public hearings or items scheduled for a certain time. So that takes us to our consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of February 1st, 2021. Item 6.2, acceptance and placement of the 2020 People's Choice Sculpture.
Are there any items that a commissioner would like to remove from the consent agenda? Well, I would like to remove item 6.2 if we could. Or actually, I'm not sure it even needs to be removed. I just would like to thank Sculpture Tour and Arts and Humanities for continuing to coordinate this and ensure that we have public art in our community. And I know that Commissioner Hoppeck's been very involved with that. So just wanted to give some recognition and thank you for that. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Commissioner Ryan, so moved.
Is there a second? I'm sorry, was there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Franz.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppeck.
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan.
Aye.
Mayor Hodges.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. We'll move on to administration, item 7.1.
Item 7.1, report on bids received for utilities sub-CIP vehicle and equipment purchases for 2021.
All right. Ms. Pack.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Debbie Pack, Director of Finance and Administration. As part of the 2021 sub-CIP that was approved by City Commission back in December of 2020, there were 2 passenger vehicles for the Utilities Department on that approved list, a half-ton vehicle pickup and a 3/4-ton pickup. The reason we're bringing this to you outside of the rest of the bids is because the 3/4-ton pickup needs to be ordered by February 15th in order to avoid a delay and a cause for have to order next year's model. So we wanted to bring that forward, and since we were bringing that one, we felt it was important to bring them both together since they're both for the same division. A report of the bids, the half-ton bid pickup, we had 1 bid. It did not meet our published specifications, so our recommendation on this item is to review those specifications for accuracy and make sure they're what we really need, and rebid that with new specifications. The 3/4-ton pickup, we also only had 1 bid. The bid came in at $43,030, which with a $30,000 trade-in. And that brought the net bid at $40,030. That did come in over budget by $1,030. Our recommendation for this particular item, however, is to accept the base bid of $43,030 and not take the trade-in. We would recommend that that vehicle be traded over to building maintenance, who currently has an older vehicle of the same type. And then we would transfer that trade-in value back to the utility fund because it is its own entity fund. We transfer that funding back to the utility fund. And then we would sell the older vehicle that building maintenance currently has. That would bring the utility fund in over a net budget of $1,030. The water and wastewater fund has $408,000 budgeted. With these particular items out of that fund, it leaves them $367,970. The transfer for the $3,000 would come from the sales tax capital fund, which is where, if we replaced a vehicle for buildings and maintenance, that would be funded out of. And that transfer will come from savings that we're already recognizing on other vehicle purchases for this year. Staff has identified the 4 standard action items. You can approve this item, you can amend it as you see fit, you can postpone it, or you can deny to approve it. I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Pack. Are there any questions or comments from the commission?
Commissioner Hoppick here. Is it unusual for us to just receive one bid on vehicles like this, or is this fairly common?
I talked to the central garage because of that concern, and they actually reached out to several vendors that normally provide us bids, and I'm not sure if John Doerr is on the line or not. And pretty much they just weren't bidding. A lot of times it'll be because they don't feel like they can get the bid. In the past, since I've been here, we typically have 2 or 3 bids on vehicles of this type, but the other 2 bidders that I've seen did not choose to bid on any of these vehicles this year. But we did reach out to them personally and say, we have these bids out there. Do you want to bid?
Thank you.
Anyone else? Are there any members of the public that have questions or comments on this item?
I have no hands raised.
Thank you, Ms. Driscoll. With that, I'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion or action.
Commissioner Hoppick here. I move we approve the rejection of bid on 1 half-ton pickup and approve the purchase of 1 3/4-ton pickup from Long MacArthur in the amount of $43,030 as recommended, and authorize city manager to sign the contract with selected vendor.
Commissioner Davis, second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the rejection on 1 half-ton pickup and approve the purchase of 1 3/4-ton pickup from Long MacArthur, or approve the rejection of the, I'm going to confuse myself here, approve the rejection of the bid on 1 half-ton pickup and approve the purchase of 1 3/4-ton pickup from Long MacArthur in the amount of $43,030 as recommended, and authorize the city manager to sign the contract with the selected vendor. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oh, I'm sorry, roll call. Sorry.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner France,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Hodges.
Aye. Thank you. That passes 5-0. We'll move on to item 7.2.
Item 7.2, first reading, ordinance number 21-11053, certification of final cost for 2020 special assessment projects and setting March 1st, 2021 as the date of public hearing.
Thank you. I see Mr. Stack's face. Oh, there's there he is himself. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Stack.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. This action is for 3 projects, one of which, Pheasant Ridge number 3, was adopted and passed in the end of 2018, advisability and authorization for that project. And then Stone Lake and 9 South were passed near the end of 2019, in October of that year, for the advisability and authorization of those projects for infrastructure construction, and then advising to set the preliminary assessments at that time for those projects. Now that the projects are complete, we have the final costs and portions of city share, if applicable. Only one of those is applicable in this case, 9 South being the one that did have a portion of the city share for some work on 9th Street to close some access drives and construct basically new ones, as well as some extensions on Marketplace to the north to connect with the existing Marketplace. The projects have been completed and costs are finalized. So it's now the process of going through to start to sell the bonds, I guess. So let's see, I guess the actions are to for the city commission to accept the statement of final costs and then set March 1st, 2021 as the special assessment hearing date, as well as passing the ordinance on first reading. I will be here for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stack. Are there any questions or comments from the commission?
Mr. Franz, there, 9 South, I presume, is the area on South 9th Street that is just, I guess, between the old roller skating rink and Sam's Club area. I think we used to call it the Pumpkin Patch or something like that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is that really finished at this point? Because I remember thinking driving past it, it doesn't look finished, but maybe it is. I presume all the public improvements are in place.
That's correct. They are.
And that's slated to be a commercial development, I presume?
Correct.
Okay. Now on the other two developments, Pheasant Ridge and Stone Lake, do you happen to know what the average lot sizes on those developments are? And the reason I ask is I'm going to be less favorable in the future towards assessment on large lot developments. I think that's the wrong place to be putting our assessment resources. And I'm just wondering about what level these are going to be built.
Yeah, I'm looking here. Pheasant Ridge are the smaller lots,
Okay.
but Stone Lake 2 are those are larger lots. So I can look up the acreages. It's interesting. Yeah, they give you the lot and the block, but they don't give you the acreage until you actually have to go back to the preliminary plat.
I would appreciate that information for second reading.
Okay.
You know, and I know that Stone Lake has the lot sizes in that subdivision are relatively variable. I mean, they're spread out from being relatively large to what I would consider more normal sizes.
Right. Yeah, there's Stone Lake 2. I guess I did have a map ready in case you want to look at it. So might as well, if you wouldn't mind pulling that up and sharing your screen, Lauren, that would be helpful.
Okay. Still on Raptor?
Yep. Thank you. So that's Pheasant Ridge, and those are the smaller lots of the Pheasant Ridge subdivision there, all about the same size. Those have developed really well. They are just the medium-sized, smaller to medium-sized lots, I guess you'd say. Next slide.
Mike Scraig here. I just randomly called up, I guess it'd be lot 17 of the Pheasant Ridge addition. It is 10,671 square feet, which is not quite a quarter acre.
Okay, so those lots would all be probably between 10 and larger lots, maybe 15,000 square feet.
Yeah, I think they're all pretty uniform. Maybe those ones on the south of the cul-de-sac, but other than that, they're probably all right about 10,000 square feet.
The ones across block 2 look to be a little larger too, but they're a little shorter and wider, so I don't know how that plays out. All right, thank you.
And then here are the Stone Lake lots, as Commissioner Friends correctly pointed out. Yeah, those are kind of variable in the Stone Lake subdivision, especially with the lake lots being probably quite a bit larger than some of the other lots across the street. Yeah, right there, you'll see the 17 lots with the red line around them. Those are the lots for Stone Lake 2 that are in question. And Mike was able to get to that pretty quickly. I'm getting there myself now.
Yeah.
Are you
lot 7 on the north side is 16,287 square feet, and lot 3, I think. Lot 3 is 31, almost 32,000 square feet.
Lot 3 in block 4, not block 5.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. I was looking at lot 3 in block 5 and I said, that doesn't look right.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
North side of the road, still kind of that smaller range, but south side definitely larger.
Larger. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Wayne Nelson has come into my office and given me the estate lots kind of around 30 to 34,000 ish in that subdivision, with the more normal size lots at around 17,000 square feet.
Thank you.
And the last slide here, Lauren, if you scroll up one more.
Commissioner topic here, but those, Commissioner Franz, those lots that are in block 4, those aren't part of phase 2. Those were part of phase 1, correct, Mr. Stack?
I'm looking here. There definitely are some lots in block.
Well, those
4.
last 4 might have been over there to the on the north side.
I'm looking at the red line. I presume that's
block 4.
Right.
There's four lots along the lake there that are block 4, lots 1, 2, 3, and 4, and block 4 along the lake there that are in this phase, Stone Lake phase 2.
I guess what I want to know is all those to the west there were part of that phase 1.
They're
correct.
Phase 1. Yes.
Yep. Correct. Lastly, this slide shows the 9 South subdivision there. So I guess it may look unfinished. I guess maybe a little bit just because there hasn't been any commercial development per se started there yet. They did have a tenant, we believe, that was going to start, but just with the pandemic has not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dan, could you go back to the picture of Stone Lake? I don't know what the block would be called, but that unfinished area, what looks like the southeast corner of the picture. There'll be future requests for special assessments to complete that road, and I'm assuming this is the part that has to have another fire access road once you get down to that bottom corner.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm not sure they've platted that yet. I don't think they have actually. It was a preliminary plat at one time. Yeah, just have it kind of circle around the lake there. So it's taken a while to build this out, but I guess we would foresee that would probably eventually get developed. Yes, you're correct.
Right. Is north at the upper end of this? I'm just temporarily disoriented. North is at the top of the picture?
Correct.
Okay. We had discussion about the length of that road without fire access, and did we agree that up to this point it was acceptable or within the limits of what our code currently allows? Any further, there has to be provisions for another.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a planning item. I know there was a lot of discussion about that, but I guess I believe it was. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, that concern came up as a condition of platting, so I think it was satisfied before proceeding with the plat, let alone the installation of the infrastructure. And I know there was conversation about a temporary access point to the north and shared easement on the private drive there that you can see running east and west. So I don't know that it shows on the aerial photograph, but I believe alternate access was gained that way.
That's correct. Yeah, it's a good thing to note is they had to complete a fire access road along the neighbor to the basically adjacent property owner to the north side there, where those trees kind of straight line running west to east. There's a completed fire emergency access road through there. That had to be completed prior to them starting and kind of finishing this subdivision, and that has been completed.
So is that what's to the west of lot 1?
Yes. Commissioner Hoppick here. I was out there the other day, and that which looks like a small lot there that just comes straight north off that road. That's
right.
And there is access there now?
Correct.
Okay. I knew that there was a plan to do that. I just didn't know if it was in place.
Yeah, the developers for actually Stone Lake Phase 3A, they were responsible for putting that in kind of right off the bat, and they have done that because they knew that was kind of a negotiated agreement between the two of them to pay for it, and such that Bradley could get this subdivision finished. They had to do that first, and yes, that has been completed.
All right, thank you.
Which does raise the question, maybe at a future meeting. I know we've had these conversations about cul-de-sac lengths and emergency access road, and it might be nice to have an update on the inventory that I know we talked about quite a while back in terms of getting an inventory of the subdivisions and a status update of the various emergency access roads that service those subdivisions. Does anyone else have another question, comments? Oops, I did something on my screen. Are there any questions or comments from the public?
I have no hands raised, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Driscoll. I do see that we have bond counsel Gina Rieckhoff here. If we have any questions specific for her expertise, I guess now's the time. And Ms. Rieckhoff, is there anything that you need to add for us?
I don't have anything to add. I think Dan did a great job summarizing everything.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion or action.
Commissioner Ryan here, Mayor. I move we approve the city commission, that the city commission accepts statement of final cost set March 1st, 2020 as the special assessment hearing date and pass ordinance number 21-11-053 on first reading.
Commissioner Franz, I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve on first reading ordinance number 21-11053. We'll have a roll call.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Franz.
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick.
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan.
Aye.
Mayor Hodges.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. We don't have any development business, which brings us to other business. Is there any item that the commissioner would like to bring up during other business?
Mayor Hodges, I would ask, I guess this is a request, but I presume at this point you've received nominations from everybody for the review board. And I would request that you share that list with the rest of us, along with maybe a tally of how many commissioners supported which suggestion, so we can have some kind of idea of what the remaining field of candidates looks like.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Commissioner France. I was going to speak to this. Something that struck me is there were a number of commonalities, but each of us also had a couple of candidates that were unique to them. And so I think in going forward, I appreciated being able to look and see what all of you were thinking. And it made me go back and look at who I had picked kind of with a fresh perspective. So at any rate, I will get that done, and I will get that out to everyone at some point this week, because I want to thank you all for submitting your selections, and I have sent them, your completed ones, on to Mr. Scragg in case there is a Freedom of Information Act request. The city will be able to fulfill that, but I will get the tallies out as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that'd be very helpful for all of us to
Sure.
look at. Say, gives a different perspective.
Absolutely. And yeah, like I said, I think what I found, what was really interesting to me is the ones that we didn't have in common, because like I said, it made me take a second look and think, okay, what did I miss? What did he see that the rest of us didn't see? So it was interesting. A lot more commonality than you would than not. So is there anything else? Well, could we, oh wow, it's 4:41. If there's nothing else, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Hoppick here, so moved.
Commissioner Ryan, second.
We have a motion to adjourn. Roll call.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Franz,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Hodges.
Aye. So we will, next week is President's Day, so we will be back here on the 22nd. And thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.